Arctic Rescue is the tallest, fastest, and longest straddle coaster on the West Coast. Located at SeaWorld San Diego, this was the park's new for 2023 edition. Some of these Intamin straddle coasters have an edge to them, but is that the case with Arctic Rescue, or is it firmly a family coaster? I will explain in this review. One of the first rides added to SeaWorld San Diego was a motion simulator. This ride opened in 1994's Mission Bermuda Triangle, but it was converted into Wild Arctic for the 1997 season. This was a turbulent attraction where guests rode a helicopter towards a research station, but they encountered a series of hazards on the way. While the ride received praise in its early years, it felt very dated a few decades later, which is why the ride closed early in the 2020 season. The Arctic-themed animal exhibit sharing the same space remained open. Flash forward to 2023 and the park added Arctic Rescue. This was an Intamin straddle coaster. This model can be found at two other parks in the chain. SeaWorld San Antonio added Wavebreaker in 2017. This ride is smartly built above the water, and it routinely is the longest line in the park, as it has been a smashing success with families. Then 2023, Busch Gardens Williamsburg added Dark Coaster. This was placed entirely indoors, replacing the former Curse of Dark Castle Dark ride. While Arctic Rescue also replaced an indoor attraction, the ride takes place entirely outdoors. However, the ride is barely visible from the midways. Much of the layout hugs the ground, then it's surrounded by fencing and butting up right against a backstage area, so you can't see much of this ride prior to boarding. You can catch a glimpse of the blue track from a few spots, most notably from atop of Emperor. The entry plaza looks great though. It is large, and it makes the ride feel grander than it really is. It repurposes what Wild Arctic had. It is completely covered, and you'll find some expedition theming on the floor, plus a series of educational signs hanging about. You then head indoors. Here, you have the option to join the queue line for the ride, or bypass it for the animal exhibit. I mentioned the ride is entirely outdoors, but I thought the queue line at least would be indoors. Nope. You go inside at the start to access the lockers. These are paid, and you'll need to put any bags in here. Then you go back outside for the queue line, which consists of a series of switchbacks. They are covered at least, but outside of one large sign, there really isn't anything to look at. And that's unfortunate because I've heard this ride routinely is the longest wait at SeaWorld San Diego ever since opening. The ride typically has garnered hour-long waits in the weekends or school vacation weeks. Part of that is the newness, and part of that is the capacity. The ride tends to run just one train unless it's an extremely busy day. So I would recommend making this your first stop, especially if you visit on a day when school is not in session. When I went here right after the park opened, the ride was a total walk-on for me, so I was able to get a few laps in a row without having to leave the station. This ride is offered in the park's paid quick queue skip the line pass system, but it's currently a pricey one-time upcharge. That is what SeaWorld typically does with their newest rides, so I imagine it will switch to an unlimited option sometime in the next year. When you reach the end of the queue line, you go back inside for the load platform. This is quite dark, especially with many of the walls and much of the ceiling being black, but there are some welcome additions that liven things up. There are these blue screens above the queue gates. Then there are blue, green, and teal decals on the walls. While I wouldn't call it theming per se, it does give the ride a stylized appearance. You are welcome to select any row of your choice. The ride is 8 rows, each seating 2 guests side by side. I don't think the forces vary too much throughout the train, but if you want that unobstructed view, you can wait an extra train or two for the front. The seats are similar to the other Intamin straddle coasters. You have a comfortable seat and are secured by just a lap bar. The sides of the bar can make it a tight squeeze if you have wide hips or thighs, so be prepared for that. Then you can either sit upright, or you can lean forwards like you're on a snowmobile, grabbing those handlebars. I always do this to enhance the sense of speed. Once dispatched, you slowly round a corner towards Launch 1. I was hopeful there'd be some sort of show scene, similar to what was featured on Wavebreaker, but instead, you roll right into the launch, which I think is a missed opportunity. The launch is pretty good though. If you're in the front row, it catches you off guard. There's no countdown, and you don't take off until the back of the train has rounded the prior turn. And the tires accelerate you at a solid clip, forcing your body backwards. The launch takes you outdoors to the main layout, which is a convoluted mess of turns. Before discussing the elements specifically, I want to give some generalizations about the layout. First, the course was better landscaped than I imagined. I was worried this would be plopped down a barren parking lot or dirt patch, as we've seen with a few other recent additions in the SeaWorld chain. Instead, Arctic Rescue has white-colored rocks placed beneath the track to simulate snow. Then the rest of the area is filled with brown dirt, allowing the snow to really pop. Then the park has also planted some trees. This was further complemented by the fencing on the perimeter of the attraction being painted with evergreens as well. Second, there was some light theming. This mostly consisted of signs and research equipment scattered about. I particularly liked the helicopter because that paid homage to the former attraction. Third, this very clearly is meant for families. Some of these Intamin straddle coasters like Juvaland at Jura Summerland or Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Islands of Adventure have an edge to them. This one is closer in thrill level to Wavebreaker. The turns and forces are very mild if you're a thrill seeker. With all of that out of the way, let's run through the elements. That first launch is followed by a small S-hill, which in reality is one of the tallest hills in the ride, and it's maybe 2 stories tall maximum. Don't expect any negative Gs, you don't get those in this ride. Then you hug the ground for an S-bend and a turnaround. I like how you keep changing directions, but they're controlled enough so you don't get any laterals. Then you have an even smaller S-hill and another S-bend. This wraps up the first third of the ride. This takes you into Launch 2, which takes place in the semicircular tunnel. This helps enhance the speed, and like Launch 1, it does have a nice kick to it. Immediately after, you have a low bank turn left. This is the most forceful turn in the ride, as it offers some decent positive Gs. This leads to an S-hill that I believe is the largest element in the ride at roughly 3 stories in height. The hill itself is mild, but the exit is exciting. It leads directly in this low right-hand turn. This turn has solid force further back in the train, and you get a scary near miss with a sign if you're seated on the right side of the train. It is placed on the inside of the turn, and it feels like you'll smack right into it. You then have a speed hill. It's elongated, so you don't pop out of your seat, but you may get a little weightlessness sensation. Then you have some more mild S-bends towards Launch 3. Like the first 2, this tire-driven launch has a decent acceleration. Then you have a big hill that twists you right. It's underbanked on the entry, so it offers some fun laterals going up. Then you have a bunny hill that sharply banks left at the apex. It looks pretty wild off-ride, but doesn't really do too much. Next is a quick turnaround that offers some solid Gs. Then you have a quick bunny hill and gently hop upwards into the final brake run. You then head back inside the research station, ending the 2,800 foot or 850 meter long coaster. A lot of launch coasters feel short, but Arctic Rescue does not have this problem. You have nearly 1 minute of prime ride time. And it's worth noting that after you ride, you can head right through the Really Done Wild Arctic Animal exhibit. There, you'll see beluga whales and walruses. And you can also pass the former simulator's exit, which isn't really hidden at all. So, what would I rate Arctic Rescue? I would give this coaster a 5 out of 10. It's a fine coaster, the launches have nice kicks to them and are easily the highlights. Then the layout packs in plenty of twists and turns. But it is one of the weaker straddle coasters out there, as the layout isn't heavy on the forces. I do like the aesthetic touches added along the route at least, and the ride is ultimately fun, it just doesn't really stand out. But it does give the park a nice family coaster, as this is less dynamic than Manta across the park. The only issue is that the height limit is 48 inches, but that is a commonality with most straddle coasters. It's just a shame young kids can't ride it until they're older. So those are my thoughts on Arctic Rescue at SeaWorld San Diego. What are your thoughts on this coaster? Have you been on it? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate if you gave this video a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.